We have seen that exchange value implies that commodities have an intrinsic value expressed in different exchange ratios. This value is not use value or exchange value, but a third thing. What is this value? Where does it come from? Marx argues that it is the labor time that society devotes to the production of these commodities that accounts for this underlying value. Commodities that take more labor to create have more value than ones that take less labor. As labor becomes more productive, as it becomes easier to produce things, their value falls. But what is Marx's justification for choosing labor as this third thing?
There are lots of properties common to all commodities, besides the fact that they are products of labor. Marx could just as easily have said scarcity or utility were this third thing. This, of course, is the approach taken by marginal utility theory, which argues that it is our subjective desires for commodities in relation to their scarcity that determines their value. Why is it that Marx doesn't take this route?
For one, scarcity and utility cannot be understood without reference to labor. The amount of a commodity that exists at any point in time is clearly related to the amount of labor that has been devoted to producing that commodity. And utility isn't just some abstract individual substance detached from the labor process. Subjective desire only counts economically when it is turned into real action, when we buy things in the market. The only way to enter the market as a purchaser is also to enter it as a seller. We must sell the products of our labor and then use this money to buy the commodities we desire. The only means of attaining our desires is the buying and selling of the products of labor. Not only does capitalism shape our desires, it determines how we go about attaining our desires. But there is an even more important reason why Marx doesn't choose scarcity and utility as the determinants of this underlying value. Utility and scarcity both describe the relation between individuals and objects. Marx is interested in the relations between people. If we think back to Marx's argument about commodity fetishism, we'll remember that in a capitalist society, the relations between people take the form of relations between things. Objects appear to have power and value on their own. But this world of appearances is not the full story. These value relations between commodities are actually relations between people whose work is coordinated indirectly through commodity exchange. And this is where any social theory must begin, with a study of the productive activity of people as they work to create the world they live in. Not only is this the best starting place for an analysis of society, it is also the best starting place for a radical social theory whose aim is to investigate the possibility of changing the world. If we realize that human society is not the result of some natural or divine eternal logic, but merely the creation of our own labor, then that means that we have the power to mold and shape the society as we see fit. In a capitalist society, these creative powers take the form of an external world of value and capital that acts back upon society, shaping it against the will of its creators. Yet, in the end, the world of capital is nothing but the product of our own creation. If we truly want to change the world, it is not up to nature, God, fate, or experts, but up to us. This is the radical challenge of the law of value. Let's review and clarify a few points. 1. The usefulness of a commodity is its use value. Uses can't be quantitatively compared. 2. The exchange value of a commodity is the proportion at which it exchanges with other commodities. 3. Price is a specific type of exchange value, the ratio at which a commodity exchanges with money. 4. The fact that commodities measure their worth against each other implies that they have an intrinsic value. 5. This intrinsic value is not a physical thing, nor is it magically bestowed upon commodities. It is not a timeless trait existing for all products of labor everywhere. Value, in the way Marx uses the term, is the means by which the labors of isolated producers are coordinated through commodity exchange. It is the social substance that binds together the labors of isolated, disparate individuals separated through the market. We notice then that value and price are not the same thing. The value of a sandwich may be 1 hour of labor, yet we don't see this 1 hour when we buy a sandwich. All we see is price. Prices are just the exchange value of commodities measured in money. The only way we see value is indirectly through these quantitative relations between commodities. Though value and price are indirectly linked, their connection is still strong. If demand rises suddenly, causing the price of sandwiches to rise, this will trigger an inflow of sandwich-making labor to meet demand. And once supply and demand have balanced, price falls back down to meet value. If the productivity of sandwich making rises, the time it takes to make a sandwich falls, the supply rises, and the price falls. Prices and values constantly fluctuate around each other, constantly co-determining each other. The last thing we should note is that this concept of value is historically specific. Unlike bourgeois economic theory, which projects its categories of utility and capital back in time to make all of history retroactively bend to the laws of capitalism, Marx's theory of value describes a specific type of social organization unique to a society in which the dominant form of production is production from market exchange. When we don't produce directly for use, but for exchange, we find that our productive activity is regulated by unconscious economic laws, which Marx calls the law of value. Whereas before we said there was an antagonism between use value and exchange value, we can now say that this is really an antagonism between use value and value. As long as production is production to produce values instead of uses, we will have to deal with the social antagonisms that spring from this contradiction. The logic of profit will dominate over society rather than the logic of usefulness. And the nature of work will be to maximize profit at all cost, rather than to maximize the quality of the experience of work or the life of the worker.